First of all, the Respect Institute is about a 3.5-day program where 12 participants, 12 individuals, come together and are coached and encouraged and given the technical assistance required to be able to tell their personal story of their illness, of their treatment, and in particular of their recovery. We have found over the years that one of the most effective ways to destigmatize mental illness is for people who've experienced it to stand up and tell their personal story. Okay? When other people go out on our behalf and try to convince somebody that people with mental illness are not more dangerous, they're just like you and me, that we found that it actually creates suspicion among a community. Why are you trying to convince me that mentally ill people are okay, they're like you and me? There must be some reason, underlying reason you're trying to convince me of this. What we have found is that when people tell their personal story, that the audience, while they're looking at the person and seeing that human being standing here telling their story, that they're connecting with their humanity. And the fact is that it's very difficult. You will always stumble and fall short of treating someone respectfully if you don't see the humanity in that person. So by sharing your personal story, you give an up-close and personal, a glimpse into your humanity. People see who you are because you're clearly articulating your story. And you're sharing it in a very strategic and a very polished way. Nobody needs to apologize or be embarrassed for having a mental illness or a psychiatric challenge. And so why should we hold these stories inside? Some of you may have watched the Olympics recently. You know, the Olympics are great. I just love watching all the competition. But you know what I like best? Are those personal stories that they show on certain individuals and what they've overcome to become an Olympian. And as they show these personal glimpses and stories, we're able to see the humanity that lies within this real tough and competitive athlete. You know, we're able to see beyond everything else and connect with the humanity. And I believe that that's the way that we are ultimately going to cause and affect our community to have compassion and understanding towards us. When we articulate our story in a very informative and a very constructive way. Now, I got to tell you, I stumbled upon this. I didn't sit down and say, well, you know, there's these self-help dynamics and there's this research. What we found in the process of developing the Institute is that the 12 participants support each other. They help each other shape the theme of their presentation. They give feedback to each other on what sounds the most effective, what are the more salient points that need to be made, what's a different way of sharing this story. And it's just amazing. So many people come to the Institute very hesitant to present their story because it's so frightening. They don't want to go back. And once they see that other people are willing to talk about their life experiences, they jump in. You know, they see a benefit to it, a cleansing, if you will. And I want to make sure that something is emphasized here. There's no re-traumatization in the Respect Institute by telling your story. Frankly, because there's simply no analysis going on. It's the analysis that sometimes causes us to re-traumatize. But in the Respect Institute, we show complete acceptance and honoring and love for that person. We support them entirely and we allow them to work through their life experiences as to what they want to share. One of the principles of the Respect Institute is that, you know, you choose what it is you want to present. One of the other principles is that, you know, everyone in this room has a very dynamic and personal story to tell, a very unique story. But guess what? If you don't tell it, it'll never get told. And to me, the most precious natural resource we have in this country, and especially in the mental health field, is your personal stories. Because what lies within your personal stories are insights and gems of wisdom that we need to be able to mine. We need to be able to get out from underneath all this underbrush and present it and be proud of our experience. Be proud of it. I remember after 3 years of being hospitalized, I was living in the community up in Lansing, Michigan, where Michigan State University is. And I was invited to a party. And at the party, I met this very friendly woman, and I thought she was interested, you know, in me. And so we kept talking, you know, and I remember at the end of our conversation, of course, I didn't know it was coming to an end, but she said, my name is Nancy, and I work over here at Michigan State University in the personnel department. And I asked her what she did, and she explained it, and she says, what's your name? I said, my name is Joel. And she says, well, what do you do here in the Lansing area? And I says, well, I'm a schizophrenic. But that's the only story I knew to describe myself after spending 3 years in the hospital. I learned to define myself by my diagnosis. And when you go out in the community, a diagnosis has no value. If anything, it has a negative value. But I had no clarity to my experience. I had no understanding. And I have found that in the Respect Institute, people become more clear. And once they start using tangible words to describe events in their life that didn't make any sense, the experience is less frightening. It's less mysterious. You know, once you learn to articulate, I've told my story so many times that I can sit down and talk about my mental illness and recovery experience just like I can sit down with you and talk about a basketball game. Okay? My experience is no longer frightening and mysterious and scary to me. I've got clarity. I've been able to articulate it. And I submit to you that there's one thing about telling your story in a small peer group, maybe down at the Greasy Spoon restaurant or something. But boy, when you stand up in front of a group of people, a group of professionals, a civic organization, a high school classroom, a university setting, and you tell your story, you have a most profound impact on those people who are listening. It will change the way that they practice. It will change the way that they look at people with mental illness. Something will shift inside of them. I've seen it happen. In Farmington, Missouri, one of the 12 participants in one of the Respect Institutes had some developmental disability challenges, but at the same time had a mental illness. And everybody tried to talk him out of participating in the Respect Institute. But you see, we don't have a lot of criteria in the Respect Institute because we know that everybody has a story. You know, so you're welcome, as long as you have that story to share. Well, they said he'll never sit through the 3 days of training, that he'll never be able to focus, he'll never be able to concentrate and do what you ask of him. He came to the Institute. Once he realized that he was telling his own story, and he said himself that when he started telling his story, it was the first time he'd ever heard his story told the way that he wanted it to be told. That up to that point, all he'd ever heard is what other people had described about his life experience. So excited, and many times we'll have graduates of the Respect Institute at each institute, and so they're there kind of to help. They're veterans, so they assist the other institute participants. They work with this fella. He would get up at 4 in the morning to work on his speech. And on the final day, there's a graduation ceremony. And 3 of the participants are selected by the group to present their story at this graduation ceremony. And he was selected as one of them. And even to this very moment, I remember when he got up and presented. It was in a courtyard of this hospital, and there were probably 150 people in chairs that were organized there in that courtyard. And he gave his presentation, and we just don't teach people how to share their story, we teach them how to present publicly. You know, eye contact, how to be centered, how to connect with an audience, and so forth. And when he finished, the world shifted. The place just went, there was an uproar, because nobody in that environment ever had any confidence in this young fellow until he got up and presented his story. And it was articulate. And even though he needed to polish up some of his skills, he made sure that he did everything that was taught during that institute. For example, scanning the audience. And after he would say something, he would lift his head up and he would scan the audience. And then he would go back again, and then he would continue on. Everything was technically sound, but most importantly, he told his story. And what people share is that they begin to realize that that it's almost easier when you're desperate and when you're fighting for your recovery. It's almost easier to try to just forget about all those experiences. But the fact is we really can't forget about them, can we? Out of it. Dr. Bill Anthony out of Boston University, he said one time, he said that people who have experienced a mental illness sometimes spend the rest of their life trying to make sense out of experiences that never made any sense. Okay? And that's what the Respect Institute is all about. It's trying to make sense out of experiences that never made any sense. In Nevada, Missouri, at the end of one of the Respect Institutes, we always go around the room and share with what we gained, what we found beneficial from the 4 days together. And there was this gentleman there. He's probably 45 years old or so, and he looked up and he said, the only thing I can say right now that comes to me is that I wish I had the Respect Institute 6 months ago. And I said, well, why do you say that? He says, well, 6 months ago, I went to my 20th year high school reunion, or 25th, I can't remember what it was. He said, and everyone asked me, where have you been? What happened to you? And he said that every night he went to sleep, those nights over that weekend reunion, feeling awkward, that he didn't know how to articulate what he had experienced. He didn't know how to clearly describe his life experience so that he could confidently stand there and tell people, well, this is what happened to me. And instead, he said he went back to his room kicking himself because things came out of his mouth he didn't know how to describe it. He'd never taken the time or had anyone coach him and help him on how to tell his story. Okay? So it was very awkward. He said, but if I had this institute before, he says, I could very easily stand there in front of my old friends and articulate my story without any embarrassment. I could articulate and I could share with them what I want them to know, not what they want to guess or assume about me, but what I want them to know about my life experience. Not everybody is going to come out of the Respect Institute and become a public speaker. Okay? Many will. And the goal is to get those who want to continue on to be a public speaker out in front of different audiences. What's really missing, for example, in social work school, in medical school, in almost all health sciences curriculum, is hearing that personal experience. Getting a glimpse into the humanity of the people they're serving. Just think about it. If all you learn is from a book, a textbook, or something academic, you're never going to see the humanity that lies within people. And in Northwest Missouri, for example, they have a university up there, and they used to send some of their social worker students down to the hospital to hear the Respect Institute speakers. They found it very beneficial. Well, the hospital decided to do something that I had recommended for quite some time, and that's to have a respect day, where everything is focused on respect, and allow your Respect Institute speakers to speak throughout the day. And this university hired a bus in 65 students from their social work, nursing, and other health sciences classes to hear the Respect Institute speakers. It's just very profound. It gives people that connection with their humanity. Not everybody wants to disclose their life experience either. You know, there's a lot of research that's been done on self-disclosure. Everybody does it for a different reason. And it should be something that's selective. But one of the reasons we're so concerned about making sure we find the right audience is because we haven't taken the time yet to articulate our experience, to learn how to tell it so that everyone can understand it. So what we do is we walk on eggshells, you know, well, I wonder if I can tell this person my story. I wonder if I can tell that person my story. You know, or maybe they're going to think differently. The Respect Institute gives you the confidence to share your story, to never be apprehensive. Okay? And what we do is the Mental Health America, well, let me take a step back. While Jen and the Consumer Network is helping to set these up at every community around the state, the Mental Health America of Georgia, the coordinator there, is going to be out trying to open doors at the universities, at high school classrooms, civic organizations, sometimes churches. You know, you'd be surprised how many people, how many organizations are looking for a good speaker. I mean, they're just, and so once they hear about the Respect Institute, they're very interested in reaching out and inviting you to present. And I guess the best way to sort of wrap this up is to just sort of say, you know, there's an army of us out here. I mean, just look at this room. There's an army. And if each of us go out and articulate our story and add into that story the gems of wisdom and insights that we've gathered from those life experiences, I mean, we're going to have a profound impact on our communities.